In the summer of 1632, news spread through the castle town of Akashi that its lord and master had been promoted to the fiefdom of Kokura. Its current daimyo, Hosakawa Tadatoshi, had once been master of Moji Castle. Only a few miles by boat from Funashima Island, Musashi had stayed at Moji Castle for several months, waiting for the dust to settle in the wake of his great duel with Sasaki Kojiro. Now Tadatoshi had been promoted to the fiefdom of Kumamoto, leaving Kokura free for Ogasawara Tadazane. It was with mixed emotions that on a windswept autumn evening Musashi closed the shutters of his dojo for the last time after taking leave of his many deshi. It had not been a sad parting, for many of them he would see again. He had decided to follow his son and build a new life in Kokura, the place where 2 decades before his reputation had been established on a small island that now bore the name of Ganryu Island. Musashi's livelihood as a fencing instructor was not endangered by his move. Establishing a large dojo with the help of his son Iori, his following in Kokura grew even larger than in Akashi. Although far removed from the capital and its many diversions, countless martial artists of various schools visited his dojo to experience the art of fighting with 2 swords at first hand. Following his arrival in Kokura, Musashi had renamed his school of swordsmanship. Formerly called the Enmei-ryu, the School of the Circle of Light, he now called it the Niten Ichi-ryu, the School of the 2 Heavens United, the 2 united heavens signifying the superlative strength of the long and short sword when used together in combat. Musashi was now a man at the height of his fame. He was respected by his patron, admired by his peers, loved by his adopted son. Yet he always remained an outsider. His position was reinforced by his personal appearance. He never bothered to cut his hair, so that at times it grew all the way down to his waist. Nor did he wear the usual attire of the swordsman of his day, but outlandish items, such as long damask, white-sleeved undergarments reaching down to his feet. By this time he had also abandoned his customary 2 swords. Instead, he usually carried with him a 5-foot wooden staff, very much in the way of the itinerant monk. Yet early in January 1638, Musashi again accepted an official post of sorts. An armed revolt had broken out in the province of Hizen. The rebellion was led by the 17-year-old Amakusa Shiro. Shiro was a Christian, and so were most of his rebels, who at the peak of the rebellion numbered more than 20,000 men. They had ensconced themselves in Hara Castle, an old stronghold on the Shimabara Peninsula that had stood empty for several decades. Ogasawara Tadazane had raised a force of some 8,000 men. Musashi was to escort Tadazane's 23-year-old successor Nagatsugu, who having been raised in a time of peace had no experience on the field of battle. It was the same role Musashi had performed during the Osaka campaigns, when he had been an escort to the son of Mizuno Katsunari. Throughout the siege, Musashi was at Lord Nagatsugu's side. When the rebels threw down stones from the castle walls, he leapt in front of his lordship's horse and fended them off with his staff. In doing so, Musashi managed to safeguard his ward from injury or worse. The siege of Hara Castle was the last time Musashi saw action. More than 40 years earlier, on the island's northern shore during the fierce battle on the plains of Ishigaki, he first saw action under Kuroda Yoshitaka. He now was 54 years old, and he had fought in as many as 6 decisive battles. It was not long after the Shimabara rebellion that Musashi was approached by a retainer of Osakawa Tadatoshi, the former lord of Kokura Castle. Musashi had dueled with Tadatoshi's men on several occasions, and each time he had won. Now the daimyo of one of the largest fiefs in the country, Tadatoshi wanted Musashi to come to Kumamoto and instruct his retainers in the art of fighting with two swords. Aware of Tadatoshi's status and deep interest in the martial arts, the swordsman accepted. Musashi arrived in Kumamoto in September 1640. He was given a comfortable mansion just inside one of the curves of the Hirai River, on the northeastern side of the castle grounds. To meet the swordsman's needs, Tadatoshi issued a string of edicts, specifying horsemen for the occasions on which Musashi would be traveling, down to salt, ink and firewood for his daily living. Though his glory years lay far behind him, Musashi was not content simply to dwell on past victories. Time and time again, whilst drilling his students in a specific technique, he would return to the basic laws of Heiho until his voice grew hoarse and brittle with the strain. These were not the deeply esoteric teachings found among some of the other schools. Instead, they were succinct and sound pieces of practical advice, forged in the course of numerous battles and countless duels. They were based on a life of perseverance in the face of great hardship. Not long after his arrival in Kumamoto, Musashi had begun frequenting Mount Iwato, spending much of his time in meditation and contemplation. From its top, casting his gaze towards the west, he could clearly see the Ariake Sea, shimmering in the glow of the afternoon sun before its red disk would descend behind the dark silhouette of the Unzen Mountains on the Shimabara Peninsula. Amid the stillness of a cave in the mountain's eastern slope, he finally found the peace and clarity of mind to put his most ephemeral thoughts to paper. The cave was called the Reagan Cave, and inside its hushed silence stood a statue of Kannon. Every day Musashi would sit down at the foot of the statue to write the work that would come to define his philosophy on the art of Heiho. In the early spring of 1645, Musashi finally completed the first draft of his life's work. It had taken him 5 seasons to write, 2 of them winter. Each season had seen the completion of one long scroll of continuous text in his accomplished hand. He named them the scrolls of earth, water, fire, wind and heaven. Collectively they were called the Gorin no Sho, the Book of 5 Rings, after the Gorin To, the 5-storied stupa. Not long after the completion of the Gorin no Sho, Musashi's health, which had hitherto been robust, suddenly took a turn for the worse. By the end of April, Musashi's health had deteriorated to such an extent that he was no longer able to teach. His life's work completed, and feeling that his end was near, he withdrew to his house outside the castle walls. Then, on the 6th of June, feeling his strength rapidly ebbing away, Musashi called his deshi to his side and ceremonially bestowed on them the few possessions he had held on to in old age. Finally, he handed to his chief deshi the Gorin no Sho. Musashi passed away peacefully on the 13th of June 1645. He was laid in his coffin in full armor. The following day, his remains were ferried up the Shira River and interred at Oe, on the river's eastern bank. Not far from Musashi's dwelling, where travelers entered the town along the Otsu Kaido, a stone memorial was erected at a place that came to be known as Mount Musashi. warriors and commoners alike would dismount from their horse when they passed in front of Mount Musashi to pay homage to the greatest swordsman Japan had ever known.
From the passion longing, a new sense of direction on the road ahead, on the road that's paved with lonely things. And I'm nobody. Brought from a past longing, a new sense of direction on the road ahead, on the roads paved